The grand hall stretched for miles, its ceiling lost in artificial clouds that glowed with soft blue light. Ambassador Velthar stood before the assembled representatives of 47 galaxies, his forearms clasped in a gesture of formal address. The silence was complete. Every species present knew why they had gathered. "We must discuss the forbidden topic," Velthar announced, his translator device converting his clicks and whistles into universal language. "We must speak of Earth." A wave of uneasy movement rippled through the chamber. The Karathi delegates shifted their wings. The silicon-based Vren made grinding sounds of distress. Even the ancient Morthak, who had lived for 3,000 years, closed all 6 of their eyes. High Archon Zekmor sat on the elevated throne, his scarred face betraying nothing. He was old now, ancient by Kalrith standards, but his mind remained sharp. The scars that crossed his face were not from battle. They were self-inflicted, a reminder of shame that would never heal. "Why do you bring this matter before the council?" Zekmor asked, though he knew the answer. A young delegate from the Pyrian species stood. His people had been conquered only 50 years ago. He did not yet understand the unspoken rules. "High Archon, my people wish to understand. The Kalrith Empire has conquered every species it encountered across 47 galaxies. Your military power is absolute. Your technology is superior to all others. Yet there is one small world, one single planet that you have never claimed. Why?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. Zekmor looked at the young Pyrian for a long moment. The child did not understand what he was asking. None of the recently conquered understood. They thought the Kalreth were gods, unstoppable and eternal. They did not know the truth. "You wish to know about Earth," Zekmor said finally. "Very well. But understand this. What I tell you may break your faith in the natural order of things." In the far corner of the chamber, Dr. Lyria Tain leaned forward. She was Netherian, a species conquered 800 years ago. Her kind had long since accepted their place in the Empire, serving as historians and record-keepers. But Lyria was different. She had spent her entire life studying the classified files about Earth, piecing together fragments of truth from redacted documents and whispered rumors. Now, finally, she would hear the complete story from someone who had been there. Zekmor descended from his throne and walked to the center of the chamber. With a gesture, he activated the holographic display system. The air filled with stars. 10,000 years ago, the Kalreth were not an empire, he began. "We were a single species on a single world, much like many of you once were. But we were ambitious. We developed faster than light travel. We reached the stars. The display showed a planet, beautiful and green, orbiting a yellow sun. We were not conquerors at first. We tried to be explorers, diplomats, but the universe is cruel. The first species we encountered tried to destroy us. We barely survived. The hologram shifted, showing battles, burning ships, worlds reduced to ash. We learned a harsh lesson." Zekmor continued. "In this universe, there are only 2 types of species, those who conquer and those who are conquered. We chose to conquer." He waved his hand and the display changed again. Now it showed an endless cascade of worlds, each one falling to the Kalreth war machine. For 10,000 years we perfected our method. We would arrive at a world with overwhelming force. We would destroy one city, sometimes 2, to demonstrate our power. Then we would offer terms. Join the Empire peacefully or be destroyed. The young Pyrian delegate nodded. This was the story he knew. This was how his own world had fallen. "Every species chose to join," Zekmor said. "Every species surrendered. Some resisted at first, but they all eventually understood that resistance was futile. We did not rule through cruelty alone. We offered protection, technology, and membership in the greatest empire the universe had ever known. Most species came to accept their place. Many even thrived under our rule." "So what was different about Earth?" Velthar asked softly. Zekmor's expression darkened. 500 years ago, we detected transmissions from a small planet in what you now call Sector 7. The species called themselves humans. They had only just achieved radio technology. They were primitive, barely past their own industrial age. According to all our models, they should have been easy to conquer. The hologram now showed Earth, a blue and green marble floating in space. "I was young then," Zekmor said. "A commander, not an Archon. I led the invasion fleet personally. 200 ships, enough to conquer an entire galaxy. For one small planet, it seemed like overkill. But we had our procedures." The display showed the Kalreth fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel, surrounding the planet like a net of steel. We sent the standard message: surrender or be destroyed. We expected fear. We expected panic. We expected desperate calls for mercy. Zekmore paused, and for the first time emotion crossed his face. It might have been fear. Instead, the humans sent us a reply. They said, "We wish to speak with you. We want to understand why you conquer. Please talk to us before violence begins." Several delegates made sounds of confusion. Dr. Lyria Tain was writing furiously, recording every word. "We ignored their message," Zekmore said. "We proceeded with standard protocol. We selected their largest population center, a city called New Jakarta, and destroyed it from orbit. 17 million humans died in seconds. The hologram showed the blast, the mushroom cloud, the crater where a city had been. Then we waited for their surrender. Instead, they sent another message. It said, "We mourn our dead. We are grieving. But we still wish to talk. Please tell us what you want. Perhaps we can find another way." Zekmore turned to face the assembled council. "Do you understand? We had just killed 17 million of them, and they asked to negotiate. Not from fear. Not from weakness. From genuine curiosity about us. What did you do?" The young Pyrian asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We destroyed another city. Then another. 3 more cities. 40 million dead in total. Surely we thought this would break them." The hologram showed Earth's representatives appearing on screen. They were human. Soft-skinned, small, physically weak compared to most species in the galaxy. Their eyes were red from crying, but they did not beg. "They sent their diplomats, their scientists, their artists," Zekmore said. "They showed us their music, their literature, their history. They asked us questions about our culture. They treated us like guests who had misunderstood the invitation, not like invaders who were killing them by the millions." "That makes no sense," Velthar said. "No species behaves this way." "Exactly," Zekmore replied. "That is when we knew something was very wrong. So I ordered ground forces deployed. We sent 50,000 soldiers to their surface. We expected terror. We expected submission." He paused again, and his hands trembled slightly. "What we got was war. The humans fought like demons. They used primitive weapons, chemical explosives, kinetic firearms, even bladed weapons in close combat. They died by the thousands, but they kept fighting. And here is what terrified us. They fought with absolute ferocity, but when they captured our soldiers, they did not torture them. They gave them medical care. They tried to talk to them." Dr. Lyria Tain spoke for the first time. "Hi, Archon, what happened to those captured soldiers?" Zekmore looked at her directly. "That, Doctor, is where everything went wrong. That is where the Kalreth Empire began to die." The chamber erupted in shocked sounds. Zekmore raised his hands for silence. "I will explain," he said. "But first you must understand one thing about humans. They are not like other species. They did not evolve in a peaceful garden world. They evolved in hell, and hell made them into something we were not prepared to face." He deactivated the hologram. The chamber fell into darkness except for the dim glow of the clouds above. "The next session will reveal what the humans did to our soldiers," Zekmore said quietly, "and why 500 years later we still dare not go near their world." The council session ended in silence. As the delegates filed out, Dr. Lyria Tain remained in her seat, staring at the space where Earth had hung in the hologram. She finally understood why the Empire had classified all information about that small blue world. It was not to protect the Empire's reputation, it was to protect the Empire's sanity. Commander Zekmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the surface of Earth through the main viewer. It had been 3 months since the invasion began. 3 months, and the humans still had not surrendered. This had never happened before. "Report," he commanded. His tactical officer, a young Kalreth named Vorn, approached with visible unease. "Sir, our ground forces have secured 40% of the major population centers. However, casualties are 30% higher than projected. The humans are using guerrilla tactics. They hide among civilian populations. They attack supply lines. They refuse to engage in conventional warfare." Zekmore nodded. This was not unexpected. Many species tried guerrilla resistance at first. They always failed eventually. And the psychological warfare division? Have we broken their morale yet? Vorn hesitated. "Sir, that is the strange part. We have deployed standard demoralization protocols. We broadcast messages showing our superior strength. We demonstrate that resistance is futile. But the humans? They respond with their own broadcasts. What kind of broadcasts? Music, sir, stories, something they call poetry. They share memories of their dead. They show images of rebuilding efforts. They are not trying to fight our propaganda. They are just ignoring it. Sycamore felt a cold sensation in his core. What about the captured soldiers? Have they provided intelligence about human military structure? Vorn's skin changed color, a Calreth sign of deep distress. Sir, I think you need to see the reports from the POW camps yourself. The data file appeared on Zekmore's personal screen. He read through it once, then again, certain he was misunderstanding something, but the words remained the same. Captured Calreth soldiers were being held in facilities with medical care, adequate food, and minimal restraints. They were not tortured. They were not executed. Instead, humans were trying to communicate with them. They asked questions about Calreth culture, about why they conquered, about what they hoped to achieve. One report made Zekmore stop breathing for a moment. Subject Cal 447 reported that human captors showed him historical records of Earth's own violent past. Humans have fought thousands of wars against each other. They have used terrible weapons. They have committed genocides. Subject Cal 447 states that the humans told him, "We understand why you are the way you are. We used to be like that too. But we changed. You can change too." Zekmore closed the file. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Conquered species were supposed to fear them, hate them, or submit to them. They were not supposed to offer therapy, sir, Vorn said quietly. There is more. Subject Cal 447 has requested to remain with the humans. He says he does not want to return to the Empire. What? He is not alone, sir. 17 captured soldiers have made the same request. They say that the humans have shown them things about themselves, about us, about what we have become. Zekmore felt something close to panic. This was impossible. The Calreth were loyal. They were united. They had been conditioned since birth to serve the Empire. No Calreth had ever defected. Not once in 10,000 years. Bring subject Cal 447 back to the ship immediately, Zekmore ordered. I will speak with him personally. 2 days later, Cal 447 stood in Zekmore's private chamber. The soldier looked different. His posture was less rigid. His eyes held something that Zekmore could not identify. Report, Zekmore said. Cal 447 met his gaze directly, something a subordinate rarely did. Commander, with respect, I can no longer serve in this invasion. Explain. The humans showed me something, Cal 447 said. They showed me their history. Commander, they nearly destroyed themselves. Multiple times. They developed weapons that could end all life on their planet, and they almost used them. They created diseases that killed millions. They fought wars that lasted generations. They were everything we are. Violent, cruel, convinced that domination was the only way to survive. And? Zekmore prompted. And then they stopped. Not all at once. Not easily. But over thousands of years they learned. They created systems to prevent war. They developed empathy. They started seeing other humans not as enemies but as potential friends. Commander, they evolved past what we are still doing. Zekmore felt anger rising. We are the Calreth Empire. We rule 47 galaxies. We are the pinnacle of civilization. Are we? Cal 447 asked softly. Commander, the humans asked me a question I could not answer. They asked, what have you built? Not conquered, built. What have you created that makes the universe better? We have brought order. We have ended conflicts. We have unified galaxies under a single rule. We have crushed diversity. We have silenced voices. We have forced everyone to be like us. Cal 447's voice was not angry. It was sad. Commander, the humans have been in space for less than 300 years, but they have created more art, more science, more philosophy in that time than we have in 10,000 years. Because they are not afraid of differences. They celebrate them. Zekmore wanted to order Cal 447 executed for treason, but he could not. Because deep inside, in a place he had kept locked since his youth, he knew the soldier was speaking truth. What did they do to you? Zekmore asked. They showed me kindness, Commander, not as a tactic. Just as what they are. Even while we were killing them, they treated me like I was worth saving. Cal 447 looked down. One of the humans who guarded me was a soldier named Chen. His daughter died in New Jakarta. I was part of the fleet that destroyed that city. He knew this. And still he brought me books. He taught me about Earth's history. He asked about my family. Psychological warfare, Zekmore said, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps. But Commander, if kindness is their weapon, then what does that make our cruelty? Zekmore had no answer. Over the following weeks, more reports arrived. Captured soldiers were being returned to the Calreth, but many of them were different now. They questioned orders. They hesitated before firing on civilian targets. Some refused to fight at all. Worse, the humans had started broadcasting messages directly to Calreth soldiers. Not threats. Not propaganda. Stories. They told stories of human soldiers who had fought in terrible wars and then worked for peace. They shared music that spoke of loss and hope. They broadcast images of Earth before the invasion. Beautiful cities, diverse cultures, people laughing and creating and living. They are trying to demoralize our troops, General Thax argued in the command meeting. We should jam all communications. We have tried, the communications officer responded. The humans use every frequency. They even paint messages on buildings we can see from orbit. They are very creative. Zekmore stared at the tactical display. 40% of Earth was under Calreth control, but the cost had been staggering. More ships lost than in the last 100 conquests combined. More soldiers requesting transfers. More questions being asked. And then the encrypted message arrived. It was from Commander Wrath, leader of the ground forces on Earth's largest continent. Wrath was a decorated officer, loyal for 300 years. The message was brief. Commander Zekmore, I am sending you a data file. It is an archive the humans compiled for us. It contains their complete history, their wars, their atrocities, their failures, and their victories over those failures. I have reviewed it personally. Sir, we need to abort this invasion. The humans are not like other species. They are like we were 10,000 years ago. But they survived what we survived and learned what we refused to learn. If we continue this invasion, we will not conquer them. They will change us. And I am no longer certain that would be a bad thing. Zekmore opened the data file. It took him 3 days to review it all. He saw human wars that made Calreth conquest look merciful. He saw human cruelty that shocked even his hardened mind. But he also saw something else. He saw humans rebuilding after every disaster. He saw them creating beauty from ashes. He saw them extending hands to former enemies. He saw them changing. The last file was a message recorded by human leaders. They spoke directly to the camera, directly to him. We know you see us as weak because we tried to talk before fighting, the human president said. But you misunderstand. We did not try diplomacy because we are weak. We tried it because we have been where you are now. We know what it is like to believe that strength is everything, that conquest is natural, that domination is survival. We know because we used to think that way too. Another human, a scientist, spoke next. We almost destroyed ourselves learning that violence is not strength. Real strength is choosing peace when you have the power to wage war. Real courage is changing when change is hard. You have conquered 47 galaxies, but you have built nothing. You rule through fear, which means you are ruled by fear. We pity you. The final speaker was a soldier, old and scarred. You killed millions of us. We will never forget that, but we also will never become like you. We will keep fighting, and we will keep trying to show you a better way, because that is what humans do. We are stubborn. We are irrational. We believe in second chances even when logic says there are none. This is our curse and our greatest strength. Zekmore turned off the display and sat in darkness for a long time. The invasion of Earth had lasted 6 months. It would continue for another 6. But in that moment, Zekmore knew the truth. The Calreth Empire would not conquer Earth, and Earth would conquer the Calreth in a far more terrible way than military defeat ever could. The infection began quietly, in places the High Command did not think to monitor. It started in the medical bays where returned soldiers recovered from their injuries. They spoke to each other in hushed voices, sharing stories about the humans. They talked about human medics who had treated enemy wounded. They described human civilians who had shared food with starving Calreth prisoners. They whispered about human children who had drawn pictures for captured soldiers, images of peace and friendship. The medical staff reported these conversations, but the generals dismissed them as trauma responses, combat stress. Nothing more. They were wrong. Lieutenant Vex had been captured during the Battle of Sydney. She spent 2 months in human custody before being released in a prisoner exchange. When she returned to the fleet, she seemed unchanged. She filed her reports. She returned to duty. She said nothing unusual, but at night she could not sleep. She kept remembering the human doctor who had treated her burns. The doctor's name was Sarah, and her son had died fighting Calreth soldiers. Sarah knew this. She had treated Vex anyway, talking to her about medicine and life and hope while she worked. "Why are you helping me?" Vex had asked. "I am your enemy," Sarah had smiled sadly. "Right now you are my patient. We can be enemies again later if we must, but in this moment you are just someone who is hurt and needs help." Vex had not understood then. She was beginning to understand now. She started accessing the human historical archives that had been distributed throughout the fleet. High Command had tried to delete them, but humans had been clever. They had hidden the files in maintenance logs, equipment manuals, even entertainment programs. The information spread like a virus through the Calreth network. Vex learned about World War II, about the Holocaust, about atomic weapons and the terror they brought. She learned that humans had stood at the edge of their own extinction and pulled back. She learned about the Geneva Conventions, created by humans to limit the horror of war, rules that even enemies agreed to follow. The Calreth had no such rules. The Calreth had only victory or death. Vex shared what she learned with her squad. Then her squad shared it with other squads. Within months, half the invasion force had been exposed to human history, human philosophy, human art, and they began to change. On the conquered world of Praxis 4, a Calreth occupation force received a request from the local population. The Praxians wanted to hold a cultural festival, something they had done before the conquest but had been forbidden afterward. The request was routine. The expected answer was denial. Captain Krell, the occupation commander, had recently returned from Earth. He approved the request. When his superiors questioned him, he said, "The humans allowed their conquered peoples to maintain cultural practices. It did not weaken their resistance. In fact, it seemed to strengthen their unity. I thought we should try a different approach." The Praxian festival went ahead. It was peaceful. The locals seemed happier. No rebellions occurred. Other occupation commanders heard about this and began making similar decisions. High Command noticed, but they did not yet understand what was happening. On the science vessel Quantum Storm, researchers were analyzing human biology. They wanted to understand what made humans so resilient. What they found terrified them. Dr. Tarvok, the lead xenobiologist, presented his findings to Admiral Mekresh. "Admiral, human DNA carries markers of at least 6 near-extinction events. We can see evidence of a supervolcano eruption that reduced their population to less than 10,000 individuals. We can see adaptation to ice ages, plagues, and environmental catastrophes. Every human alive is descended from the survivors of these events. So they are durable," Mekresh said. "This is useful information for planning future assaults." "No, Admiral, you misunderstand." Tarvok's voice shook. "It is not just that they survived. It is what those experiences did to their psychology. Humans have evolved to see patterns everywhere. They connect ideas in ways that seem irrational but lead to innovation. They form emotional bonds rapidly because isolated humans died during the bottleneck events. They create meaning from suffering because the alternative is despair. Admiral, humans are not just physically adapted for survival. Their entire cognitive structure is built around the assumption that extinction is always one mistake away. And this is a problem because it makes them insanely creative and completely unpredictable. They have weaponized trauma into art. They have turned suffering into philosophy. When we show them our superior technology, they do not despair. They think, on how can we learn to do that? When we demonstrate our power, they do not submit. They think, how can we turn this into a teachable moment? Tarvok pulled up a comparison chart. "Admiral, look at this. This is Calreth cultural output over the last 1,000 years. The chart showed a flat line. This is human cultural output over the same period." The line exploded upward. "They produce more art, literature, music, and scientific theories in a decade than we have in a millennium. Because they cannot stop creating. It is how they process their collective trauma." Mekresh stared at the chart. "Send this to High Command immediately." The report reached Zekmor 3 days later. He read it alone in his quarters, and for the first time in his long career, he felt genuine fear. The Calreth had conquered through consistency. They had one culture, one way of thinking, one set of values spread across 47 galaxies. It made them predictable. It made them strong. It made them unified. Humans had dozens of cultures on a single planet. They argued constantly. They disagreed about everything. They seemed chaotic and divided, but that chaos was their strength. Because when one approach failed, they had 10 others to try. When one culture could not solve a problem, another could. They were like a hydra. Cut off one head and 7 more grew back, each thinking differently. The Calreth could not fight that. They had never developed immunity to ideas. The proof arrived in the form of a rebellion. On Sarthax Prime, a world conquered 300 years ago, the local population rose up against Calreth rule. This should not have been possible. The Sarthaxians were peaceful. They had no weapons. They had long ago accepted their place in the Empire, but they had been in contact with human prisoners who had been temporarily held on their world during the Earth invasion. The humans had shared stories. They had talked about civil disobedience, peaceful resistance, and the power of collective action. The Sarthaxians did not fight with weapons. They simply stopped cooperating. They refused to work in the factories. They sat in the streets. When Calreth soldiers tried to move them, they went limp and made the soldiers carry them. Then they came back and sat down again. The Calreth had no protocol for this. They could bomb cities. They could win battles. But they could not govern people who simply refused to be governed. Zekmor sent a regiment to put down the rebellion. The soldiers arrived, saw thousands of Sarthaxians sitting peacefully in the plaza, and did not know what to do. The regiment commander called for guidance. "Sir, they are not attacking. They are not running. They are just sitting. Do we open fire?" Zekmor considered the question. If they opened fire, they would create martyrs. The humans had taught them about martyrs, people whose deaths inspired others. If they did nothing, the rebellion would spread. "Try to disperse them with non-lethal force," he ordered. The soldiers used sonic weapons. The Sarthaxians covered their ears but did not move. The soldiers used tear gas. The Sarthaxians cried but did not move. The soldiers used water cannons. The Sarthaxians got wet but did not move. After 3 days, the soldiers gave up. The regiment commander reported, "Sir, we cannot remove them without killing them. And if we kill them, I believe many of my soldiers will refuse to follow orders. They have been asking questions about why we rule these people. The humans have made them think." Zekmor closed the communication channel and sat in silence. The infection was spreading faster than he had anticipated. It was not just soldiers who had been exposed to humans. Through the network, through conversations, through the sheer mimetic power of human ideas, the entire empire was being contaminated. On 17 different worlds, occupation forces were reporting unusual behavior, soldiers befriending locals, commanders allowing cultural practices, officers questioning orders that seemed cruel. The Calreth Empire had ruled for 10,000 years through fear and power, but humans had introduced something new: doubt. Dr. Lyria Tain, working in the archives on the homeworld, uncovered classified psychological reports about human prisoners. One passage made her stop breathing. Subject H732, a human teacher named Maria Santos, was interviewed extensively. When asked why humans resist despite impossible odds, she stated, "Because someone has to remember that there is another way. Even if we lose, even if we all die, we have to show you that this," she gestured to the occupation, "is not the only option. We are planting seeds. Maybe they will not grow in our lifetime, but they will grow." Lyria cross-referenced the date. Maria Santos had been executed 2 weeks after that interview for teaching captured Calreth soldiers about human rights. But her seeds were growing. Across the empire, in places Maria Santos would never see, people were asking questions. What if conquest was not necessary? What if there was another way? What if the humans were right? The emergency council meeting took place in the most secure facility in the empire, a station in deep space where no signals could enter or leave without authorization. Zekmor, now promoted to High Archon after the previous leader's sudden retirement, stood before the assembled military leadership. "Gentlemen, the quarantine has failed." The statement hung in the air like a death sentence. Admiral Kresh stood. "Failed. The quarantine has been in place for 50 years. No Calreth ship has approached Earth. No human ship has left their system. And yet," Zekmor activated the display, "we have detected human colonies on 214 worlds. The room erupted in shocked voices. Zekmore waited for silence, then explained. Humans launched generation ships, not during the war. Before we even arrived, apparently they have been sending colony vessels into deep space for 300 years. Slow ships traveling below light speed, taking centuries to reach their destinations. We were so focused on their homeworld that we never thought to look for sleeper colonies. General Thax slammed his fist on the table. Then we destroy them. We locate every human colony and eliminate them. We tried, Zekmore said quietly. 3 years ago, we sent a task force to destroy a human colony on Kepler 442b. The local Draknir population, which we conquered 800 years ago, rose up to defend the humans. They said, and I quote, "These humans have lived peacefully among us for 100 years. They have taught us medicine and art. If you kill them, you will have to kill us too." So we kill them, Thax said. An entire planet? 30 billion Draknir? For harboring 10,000 humans? Zekmore shook his head. We tried that on another world. We destroyed the colony, and the indigenous population that protected them. Do you know what happened? 16 nearby systems rebelled. They said if we would commit genocide over refugees, then we were not an empire worth serving. He pulled up another display. This is a graph showing rebellion incidents over the last 50 years. Notice the correlation. Every time we act against humans, rebellions increase. The humans have become symbols, martyrs. The more we try to destroy them, the more powerful their legend becomes. Dr. Valen, the Empire's chief scientist, raised a tentacle. Hi Archon, what if we tried a different approach? A biological solution? Zekmore nodded. Show them. Valen activated her presentation. 15 years ago, we developed a pathogen specifically designed to target human biology. It was perfect. 100% lethal, airborne, fast-acting. We deployed it on 3 human colonies and, Thax asked eagerly, it worked. Initially. 98% mortality in the first generation. But humans reproduce quickly and have high genetic diversity. The surviving 2% had natural immunity. Within 3 generations, the entire colony was immune. They studied our pathogen, developed a cure, and distributed it to other human populations. Valen's skin changed color with embarrassment. But that is not the worst part. The humans took our biological weapon, modified it, and created a universal antiviral platform. They then shared this technology freely with every species they encountered. Hi Archon. The humans turned our genocide weapon into a gift that has saved millions of lives across multiple species. They are now hailed as healers on 40 worlds. Zekmore saw several commanders putting their heads in their hands. He understood the feeling. What about information warfare? Admiral Kresh suggested. We control the narrative. We can spread propaganda showing humans as dangerous, primitive, aggressive. We tried, Zekmore said. For 20 years, we have been running the most sophisticated propaganda campaign in our history. We portray humans as violent savages. We show footage of human wars. We emphasize their bloodthirsty history. And it has not worked? Kresh asked. It has backfired spectacularly. Zekmore played several recordings. Humans intercept our propaganda, add their own commentary, and broadcast it back. They do not deny their violent history. They own it. They say, yes, we were terrible. Look how terrible we were. And we changed. If we can change, anyone can change. Even the Calreth. He played a human broadcast. A young human woman spoke to the camera. The Calreth show you videos of our wars to make you fear us. We show you the same videos to give you hope. We were killing each other with atomic weapons just 500 years ago. We had slavery, genocide, and institutional cruelty, and we evolved past it. Not perfectly, not completely, but we keep trying. The Calreth want you to think change is impossible. We are living proof that it is not. The broadcast had been viewed by billions across the Empire. They are better at propaganda than we are, Zekmore said simply, because they are not lying. They are just telling their story. General Thax stood again, his voice desperate. Then we isolate them completely. Total blockade. No communication in or out. If they cannot spread their message, the infection will die. We implemented that 20 years ago, Zekmore replied. We surrounded the entire Sol system with automated defense platforms. Anything trying to leave is destroyed. Anything trying to enter is destroyed. Good, Thax said. Then the problem is contained. No, Zekmore said. Because we cannot blockade an idea. Humans had already spread their culture before the blockade. Their books, their music, their philosophy. It is all in our databases, being copied and shared. We try to delete it and it reappears. We banned human cultural works and they became illegal and therefore more desirable. The ban made human literature the most sought-after contraband in the empire. He displayed images of confiscated materials. Human novels printed on paper, human music encoded on crystal, human films, hidden in maintenance logs. On 30 worlds, there are underground groups that study human culture. They call themselves the Hopeful. They meet in secret. They share human stories. They discuss human philosophy. And slowly, quietly, they are changing how those worlds think about the Empire. This is treason, Thax said. Execute them. We have executed 5,000 members of the Hopeful over the last decade, Zekmore said. For every one we execute, 5 more join. They see the executed as martyrs. They see our cruelty as proof that the humans are right about us. He sat down heavily. We are trapped. We cannot destroy Earth without causing massive rebellions. We cannot destroy human colonies without turning them into martyrs. We cannot silence their message because it is already spread throughout the Empire. We cannot outcompete their propaganda because they are telling the truth and we are not. What is the truth? Dr. Valen asked quietly. Zekmore looked at her. That we built an empire on fear and violence, and humans built a civilization on hope and change. That we stagnated while they evolved. That we conquered 47 galaxies but created nothing of lasting value. That everything we are is built on the suffering of others and humans are showing everyone that there is another way. The room was silent. Admiral Kresh spoke, his voice hollow. So what do we do? Zekmore stood and walked to the viewport looking out at the stars. We have one option left. The most dangerous option. We change? Change how? Thax demanded. We start giving conquered species more autonomy. We allow cultural diversity. We reduce military occupation. We open dialogues instead of issuing ultimatums. We become what the humans are trying to teach us to be. That is surrender, Thax said. No, Zekmore said. Surrender would be admitting the humans were right. This is adaptation, evolution. We can call it reform. We can say we are modernizing. But yes, essentially we would be adopting human values. I would rather die, Thax said. Zekmore turned to face him. You may get your wish. Because the alternative is that the Empire collapses entirely. We are already seeing fractures. 15 sectors have declared independence in the last decade. Trade routes are disrupted. Trust in central authority is eroding. In 50 years, maybe less, there will be no empire left to rule. He returned to the display, showing a projection of the Empire's future. Multiple scenarios, all showing decline. If we do nothing, we collapse. If we try to fight harder, we accelerate the collapse. If we change, we might survive, but as something different than what we were. Those are all losing options, Kresh observed. Yes, Zekmore agreed, because we lost the moment we encountered Earth. We just did not realize it yet. General Thax walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back. Hi, Archon, what terrifies you most about the humans? Zekmore considered the question carefully. What terrifies me most is not their resilience, their creativity, or their stubborn hope. What terrifies me is that they are waiting. Waiting for what? For us to ask for help. The humans have been sending messages to our border every day for 50 years. Always the same message. When you are ready to talk, we are here. When you are ready to change, we will help you. We forgive you for what you did to us. We understand. We have been where you are. We will wait as long as it takes. Zekmore's voice shook slightly. They are waiting for us to admit we need help. They are offering forgiveness before we have even asked for it. And that, gentleman, is more terrifying than any weapon. Because it means they have already won. They know we will eventually come to them. Not as conquerors, but as students. And they are patient enough to wait for us to realize it. The meeting ended in silence. Each commander left with the same thought. 500 years had passed since the failed invasion of Earth. Dr. Lyria Tane stood in the council chambers once again, but everything had changed. The Grand Hall was smaller now, rebuilt after the Reformation. Wars. The assembled delegates represented, not an empire but a loose federation of independent worlds that chose to cooperate rather than being forced to submit. And she was no longer just a historian. She was the director of interspecies relations, tasked with finally answering the question that had haunted the galaxy for half a millennium. What do we do about Earth? Ambassador Velthar, now ancient and revered, sat in the place of honor. The position of High Archon no longer existed. Zachamore had abolished it before his death 300 years ago, declaring that no single being should hold such power. "The vote is before us," Veltar said, his voice amplified by technology since his natural voice had failed. "Should we dismantle the quarantine zone and formally contact Earth?" Lyria had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. She had studied every record, every report, every fragment of information about humans. She had learned their languages, read their literature, watched their films. She had become the galaxy's foremost expert on a species she had never met. "Before we vote," she said, "I want to share what I have learned about humanity's last 5 centuries." The display activated, showing Earth as it appeared now. The scars of the invasion were still visible. Memorial sites where cities had been destroyed, museums dedicated to the war. But the planet was thriving. Humans did not collapse after we left them isolated, Lyria began. They adapted. They built a civilization within the quarantine zone that rivals anything we have achieved. But more importantly, they remained true to their nature. She showed images of human colonies within the Sol system, massive orbital habitats, cities on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, a thriving asteroid mining industry. They could have built weapons to break the quarantine. Our intelligence shows they had the capability 50 years after we left. They chose not to. Instead, they built a society focused on science, art, and philosophy. They knew we were watching. They knew we feared them. And they decided to prove we were wrong to fear. A Karathi delegate raised her wing. But they still pose a threat. Their very existence undermines authoritarian structures. Yes, Lyria agreed. They do, but is that a threat or a service? She pulled up statistics. In the 500 years since Earth was quarantined, 30% of the old empire has transformed into democratic federations. Authoritarian rule has decreased by 60%. Slavery has been abolished on 95% of former imperial worlds. Cultural genocide has virtually stopped. These changes were inspired by human philosophy spreading through our networks. So they have conquered us without firing a shot, General Kren said bitterly. He was young, born long after the invasion, but he had studied military history extensively. No, Lyria said gently. They have changed us without conquering us. There is a difference. The humans have not demanded our submission. They have not threatened us. They have simply existed as an example of what is possible. She showed communications intercepts. For 500 years, humans have been broadcasting messages to us. Not propaganda, not threats. Just daily life. They share their art, their science, their struggles, and their triumphs. They show us their problems and how they solve them. They invite us to learn from them. An elderly Netharian spoke, her voice bitter with memory. My grandmother was killed in the rebellions. She died fighting for the Empire against insurgents inspired by human ideas. Lyria nodded respectfully. Many died in the Reformation Wars. The transition from Empire to Federation was not peaceful. But would you prefer to still live under the old system? Would you choose to return to a time when our species had no voice, no freedom, no choice? The Netharian was silent for a long moment. No, she admitted finally. But I do not have to forgive the humans for the chaos they caused. The humans do not ask for your forgiveness, Lyria said. They never have. They only ask that we choose to be better, and they wait patiently for us to make that choice. She pulled up a classified document. This is the complete psychological profile of humanity, compiled over 5 centuries of observation. I will share the conclusion. Humanity is a post-traumatic species that has weaponized their collective pain into hope. They are dangerous not because they are aggressive, but because they are infectious. They make others want to be better. This is an extinction-level threat to systems built on oppression, and a greatest blessing to those seeking liberation. The chamber filled with murmurs. Velthar called for silence. Dr. Tain, what is your recommendation? Lyria took a deep breath. I recommend we dismantle the quarantine. I recommend we send a delegation to Earth, and I recommend we ask the humans for help. Help with what? General Kren demanded. With becoming who we claim to be, Lyria said. We call ourselves a federation of free worlds, but we are still haunted by imperial thinking. We still struggle with the legacy of 10,000 years of conquest. The humans have experience with this. They spent thousands of years overcoming their own violent history. They can teach us, why would they help us? The Netharian asked. After what we did to them? Lyria played a recent message from Earth. A human woman appeared on screen. She was old, wrinkled, clearly nearing the end of her long life. "My name is Chen Li Ming," the woman said. "I am the great-great-granddaughter of Chen Wei, who guarded Calreth prisoners during the invasion. My ancestor taught me something important. He said, forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about choosing not to let hate poison your future. So this is my message to the people who once attacked my world. We remember what you did. We honor those who died, but we also recognize that you have changed. We see the Federation you are building. We see you struggling to be better. And we want you to know when you are ready, we are here. Not as victims, not as judges. As friends who understand the hard work of changing." The message ended. The chamber was silent. Velthar spoke softly. "This is what we have feared for 500 years. Not their weapons, not their resistance, but this, their persistent, irrational willingness to forgive. Why does it terrify us?" Lyria asked. "Because accepting their forgiveness means admitting we were wrong. It means acknowledging that 10,000 years of empire were built on a lie. It means facing the reality that we caused immeasurable suffering for nothing." She looked around the chamber. "This is why we have maintained the quarantine long after it served any strategic purpose. Not to protect ourselves from humans. To protect ourselves from the truth about ourselves," General Kren stood. "I vote against dismantling the quarantine. The humans are too dangerous. Not militarily, ideologically. If we let them into our society, we will lose the last remnants of what made us great." "What made us great?" Velthar asked quietly. "Military conquest? The ability to make others fear us? General, I am 800 years old. I have lived through the Empire and the Reformation. I can tell you with certainty we were never great. We were just powerful. And there is a difference." He turned to address the full chamber. "I was there at the first council meeting where Zekmor told us about Earth. I remember his fear, his confusion, his slow realization that humans were showing us a mirror, and we did not like what we saw. For 500 years we have hidden from that mirror. Perhaps it is time we looked into it honestly." The vote was called. It was close, closer than Lyria had hoped. But in the end, the decision was made. The quarantine zone would be dismantled. Contact would be established. Humanity would enter the galactic community. 3 months later, Lyria Tane stood on a transport ship approaching Earth. She had volunteered to be part of the first official delegation. Around her were representatives from 15 species, all nervous, all uncertain. As Earth grew larger in the viewport, Lyria felt an emotion she had not expected. Terror. Not because she feared what humans would do, but because she feared what they would think of her. Of all of them. They were coming as the children of an empire that had tried to destroy humanity. How could humans look at them without hate? The ship was given permission to land at a facility humans had built specifically for this moment. As the airlock opened, Lyria saw them for the first time in person. Humans. They were smaller than she had imagined. Softer. Their skin came in dozens of shades. They dressed in colorful clothing. They looked fragile, and they were smiling. An elderly human man stepped forward. He was using a walking aid, clearly weakened by age. But his eyes were bright. "Welcome," he said in Calreth language, speaking it perfectly. "We have waited a long time for this day." Lyria found herself unable to speak. All her prepared speeches vanished from her mind. The man seemed to understand. "It is okay to be afraid," he said gently. "Meeting for the first time is always scary, but we are not your enemies. We never were. We are just people who want to live in peace. Just like you." "Why?" Lyria finally managed. "Why do you not hate us?" The old man smiled sadly. "Because hate is easy and we are tired of easy answers. Because our ancestors fought hard to teach us that everyone deserves a chance to change. Because holding on to anger would only hurt us, not you." He extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Because we believe in hope even when it is hard.